Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90s, your retro time machine back to my favorite time period, the 90s of course.
Viewer warning. The following program contains material that may be too intense for some viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and more yawns. Play kickball in the street, man those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
Now last week we did episode 57. We were in May of 1999. I randomly pick a month and a year, and just so happened that the next episode, which is right now, is episode number 58. We're from March of 1999. So, only going 2 months back in the past. I think that's the closest I've ever had two episodes be, so. Anyway, I was 15 at this time, if you don't remember last week. I was 15 at this time, in 8th grade, and this is actually my fourth trip through 1999, so we're a quarter of the way there. I was still living at Granny's house at the time after we moved out of Marky Foe, the stepdad from hell. We moved out of there and staying with my granny until we got the apartment. Well, I guess it was sort of an apartment. Yeah, we were on the top floor. There was a bottom floor. It was townhouse, whatever you call them things, whatever, duplex, whatever it is. It's got a million names. Anyway, we ended up moving there. That's what, when I was talking about in May, we had just moved there. But at this time, we're still living at Granny's. And I'll get into some of the stuff that I was being an idiot about then. But I do want to talk about, speaking of Granny's, a bonus episode. This one, if you watch it when it comes out on December 24th, Christmas Eve. So I probably won't get nobody to watch it then. But anyway, if you want to watch it then, obviously you're watching it now, or you're not. I can't go into people's heads and make you watch it. If I could, I'd have a lot more views. Excuse me, I got freaking burps or something. Not even eaten anything recently. Anyway, the bonus episode will be coming out this Saturday. It is December 27th. It's called Over the River and Through the Woods. I think it's my 15th bonus episode. Anyway, it's Over the River and Through the Woods, Memories of Granny's. I've talked about this before. I wrote a book about 14 years ago, just about my experience at my grandma's house. Grandma and Grandpa. Granny, my grandma, I called her Granny, and Papa Jesse. My mom's mom and dad. I wrote a book about my experiences there around Christmas time and how special it was. So I kind of decided to do that for a bonus episode for December. It just seemed to fit. So I read the book on there and I give some more thoughts on it and everything. It's about an hour long. It's not too bad. If you don't know me, obviously it won't be like the most exciting thing because you don't know anything about my family. Hopefully I explain enough on there. And hopefully it gives you kind of a idea of what I'm talking about. I'm sure everybody has their own place that they remember. But that's the bonus episode. This is this episode. The 58th episode. I can't believe I've done 58 of these. Mostly every week I do one. But I had some health issues back in November that caused me to miss like 2 or 3 weeks. I can't remember, but anyway, been back the past couple weeks in a row. And if you don't know what this is, I pretty much just go through a month and a year of the 90s, talk about some of the pop culture stuff, some of the stuff I like wrestling. I'll be talking about a lot of that in a little bit because WrestleMania month. But, and just give some personal stories, but try to make sure it's something that everybody will watch, not too much of the personal stuff, that nobody know about, just give my personal observations and stuff of what I went through, and also about the stuff I'm talking about. It's not just a whole bunch of facts and stuff. I write out a little thing about stuff that happened and kind of just go from there. I kind of ramble a lot too, as you can tell. But anyway, I'm going to start off talking about music. I talked in the past about most of the music I've liked all my life has just been country music. But around this time, by the time we left Marky Flow actually, I started listening more to pop music. When I said more, I just started listening to it. I hadn't listened to any pop music before. You can tell when I go back and do, because I'm about to do it in a second here, give the number one songs on the Billboard charts, Billboard Hot 100 charts for that month. A lot of them have been like, I never heard of this song, or I only heard it years later. Because like I said, I was mostly just listening to country then. But I started listening to pop music, and I definitely know these two songs that were number one. Angel of Mine by Monica. It was like one of the first songs I remember hearing, and it's like, I don't even know what got, like, I'll talk about it a little bit later about kind of just feel myself changing, sort of. Like, it's weird, you know how, I mean, obviously you go through, like, all puberty and all that stuff, and becoming a teenager, and, you know, like, it's like each year as a teenager is almost like you're aging 5 years, it seems like, in your head. But anyway, I just started listening to other music I hadn't listened to before, and realized I had liked some of it. Anyway, that song was number 1 for 1 week, and also 3 weeks back in February, so 4-week total there. And Believe by Cher, I mean, that song was like huge everywhere. It was like her comeback song. By the way, I recently made a top 5 worst Christmas songs I've ever heard, and her rendition of the Christmas version of Home by her and Michael Bublé, or like, that's like one of the worst songs I've ever heard. Like, she just needs to retire by now. But a lot of people thought that then, and she was still number 1. So anyway, that song was everywhere. It spent 3 weeks at number 1, and then 1 week in April, so another 4-week total there. But I'll still, obviously, still listen to country music. American Country Countdown is the source I go to for my number 1s for that, because I listened to that as a kid, like forever. Every single Sunday morning I'd listen to that. But number 1 for her, I think her very first number 1 for Sarah Evans was No Place That Far, which of course sort of a duet she did with Vince Gill. He was more of a background singer than like a true duet, but you know, that's the first time I'd ever heard a song by her, and it was just amazing. Her voice is so pure. And next number 1 was number 1 for 2 weeks, the Dixie Chicks, You Are Mine. I think it was the first ballad I'd heard of them, and by then they had already started becoming huge. And it just, you know, I know all of the politics and canceling and all that stuff derailed their career, but for a time, there was a time when they were like the thing in country music. And coming in at number 1, and this shows how long this song is number 1. This song was a number 1 last week too, when I talked about 2 months in the future. But Kenny Chesney, How Forever Feels. It got the last week of number 1 in March, and then it spent a total of 7 weeks. Like I said, I talked about it last week. But this is really when he started becoming a superstar. And of course, once he started doing the island stuff, he just like became like a mega star. But a bit of news in music, kind of sad news. George Jones, during this month of March, drove his car into a bridge and then was charged with DUI. And of course, everybody knows his story. I don't know if it's still on there, but it was a Showtime series, George and Tammy. It's a really good show. It showed you know, all George's drinking and everything, and the stuff that Tammy went on with her life, and it's a really good show. But anyway, I'm sure everybody knows George Jones's problems with alcohol. This was actually like the final thing that finally got him, you know, after this he became sober, you know, until he died in I think it was 2015 he died. Yeah, but he was sober for the last 16 years of his life, and you know, I guess he finally realized that he can't do this anymore, and it's a good thing. I mean, that's one of them guys. He did so much that you don't know how he lived to be as old as he did. But you know, I'm not saying it in any kind of disrespectful way. It's the facts. One of the greatest, not just country singers, but greatest country, just music artists of all time. I really love George Jones' music. No matter what he was singing about, heartbreak or drinking or gospel songs or funny songs, just he could do it all. But an album that was released this month, speaking of Kenny Chesney from before, was the album that song came for How Forever Feels came from, called Everywhere We Go. It was his 5th studio album. It went double platinum and was really the start of his rise to fame, like I said before. He started using a little more country pop as opposed to just like, and even his his voice didn't change as much as Tim McGraw's did when he became a superstar. His voice like almost completely changed, just like Faith Hill's did. But like I said, his voice didn't change. Like he still sounded like a country singer, but not as like I can't explain it. Like if you go look up any song from his first album and then put on his 5th album and then maybe put something on from like When the Sun Goes Down or No Shoes, No Shirt, No Problems, or The Road and the Radio, that era. if you don't know anything about Kenny Chesney, I'm just kind of like, whoa, 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 whoa. But anyway, you can tell a voice change. I don't know if those things are conscious changes or what, but I know people's voices change over time, of course, but also, the more your music changes, it might change the way you sing, but I've always liked Kenny Chesney. I'm not his stuff recently, but that's just kind of, and I don't even know for a fact whether it's I don't like it or just I ain't heard it because I don't listen to the radio. I don't want to say, oh, he's changed this and this and this. Maybe if I listen to it and, judge it from that, but I just haven't listened to it. But anyway, this was the first, Everywhere We Go was the first, like, one of his biggest albums. Double platinum it was, and he would go even further than that in the future, but the singles released from it, like I said, How Forever Feels, #1 for 7 weeks. His next song was a #1 too, You Had Me From Hello, which he actually, can't remember if it was him or somebody else that wrote the song, but anyway, that's a line from a movie with Renee Zellweger, and if you know who that is, you know anything about Kenny Chesney, they got married for like less than a month and then had it like annulled, and still don't know the full story of like whatever went on there, of like why that was so quick to get married and quick to get annulled. But anyway, it's funny because that was a line from that, and they hadn't even, as far as I know, they hadn't even met each other then. But that that line from that song led to a #1, or not line from the song, line from a movie, and I can't remember what movie that is because I've never seen it. I've heard the story. One of the songs he's most infamously known for is She Thinks My Tractor's Sexy, which I know people that say, oh, it's the death of country. There's been songs like that. It's just, it's goofy. It's meant to be. It's not meant to be taken seriously. How many songs, like, you take something like that and like George Jones' song about white lightning, and they're not the same, but it's still, they're goofy songs, and stuff from, people that say it's old hardcore country can have funny novelty songs just like that, but anyway, it was the death of country, just like Garth Brooks was the death of country. But I'll get off my high horse on all that. The real death of country didn't come till about 2015. I just realized that because I said before George Jones died in 2015, and that's about the year I stopped listening to modern music. So it makes you really think that when George Jones died, that might have just finally killed country music. Like, anyway, there's been a few songs since then I've liked, but moving on. She Thinks My Tractor's Sexy, just because it was controversial and I probably not played in some areas. It only made it to #11, but that's probably one of his most well-known songs. And What I Need to Do only went to #8, but that was still a really good song. My favorite album track from the album is actually a song called Baptism. It's a duet by him and Randy Travis, and then Randy later released a solo version of that song on his Inspirational Journey. Really great gospel album if you're into gospel music. I think he made 2 of those albums, or maybe it was just Inspirational Journey, and then the second one was called Rise and Shine. That was the one with 3 wooden crosses on it. I'm sure everybody knows that, whether you listen to gospel music or not. Randy Travis's last #1, but Baptism is just exactly what it sounds like. It's about somebody getting baptized and all the feelings, and a great song. I heard it for the first time on Kenny's Greatest Hits album. It was never a single, but he thought so much about the song that he put it on there, and that's the first place I heard that, and a great song. I'm going to talk about wrestling now. I actually got a lot to talk about this week. WCW NWO Uncensored happened from Louisville, Kentucky, March 14th, and it was the 5th uncensored event. And I remember watching this on pay-per-view at Granny's house, because I had my own room, and she let me order it, and I just remember thinking it was like a crappy, because this is, of course, after the Finger Poke of Doom in January in WCW, and it started going downhill. This is only March, but, ever since that event, a lot of people say, and I don't think that event itself really killed WCW like people say it did, but it's hard to ignore the fact that since that happened, everything was just crap, and it just like rolled downhill. Crap, and it's like gathering more crap. It's like a crappy snowball. Anyway, yeah, I remember watching this. It wasn't a good event, and the main event made no sense to me. But anyway, this tells you the quality here. Stevie Ray defeated Vincent, Virgil from WWF, in a Harlem street fight to become leader of the NWO Black and White. Okay, remember that one time, you know, if you know anything about wrestling, the NWO, one of the hottest things ever. You know, Hogan, Hall, and Nash. You know, Hogan being the third man, and you know, but then they started watering it down, and they split into, you know, NWO, red and black, the Wolfpack, where Hogan was at, even though he started the black and white. But that right there tells you that Stevie Ray and Vincent, such great members that everybody always thinks of when they think of the NWO, they were fighting to see who would lead the NWO black and white. So, like, pathetic. And that's no disrespect to them either. It's just, that's your biggest stars for that brand. Just kill that brand and just have the Wolfpack. Anyway, Booker T pinned WCW World TV Champion Scott Steiner to win the title. Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko of the Four Horsemen, of course, defeated WCW World Tag Team Champions Barry Windham and Kurt Hennig, the West Texas Rednecks, and to beat them to win the titles in a lumberjack match. And then 2 weeks later, they would on Nitro, they'd drop the titles to Rey Mysterio Jr. and Billy Kidman. And then in the main event, which I was talking about before, it just made no sense to me. Ric Flair, who was the good guy before it started, basically, he was the WCW president, which this was a thing that from then on, they just like, it just like passed to everybody. Roddy Piper, Terry Funk, Ernest the Cat Miller, Mike Sanders, above average Mike Sanders. They all became WCW president or commissioner. Like they seen Vince doing the Mr. McMahon stuff, and like they homelessized, I would call it, because they just did a homeless rip-off Temu version of it. But anyway, Flair was the president then. He defeated WCW World Heavyweight Champion Hollywood Hogan. You know, the guy just 2 months ago beat Kevin Nash by poking him in the chest. And all that outrage. All of a sudden, he's the good guy now. Anyway, it somehow changed in this match. Like, I don't know why the fans were cheering him. When he was clearly the bad guy, he was doing bad guy things. It wasn't like they were, like, this, like a story like Brett and Stone Cold, the famous double heel turn at WrestleMania 13, or not double heel turn, you know, the switch. You know, Stone Cold became face, Bret Hart became heel, and that submission match at WrestleMania 13. They weren't even trying that in this, and the fans were just, I don't think the fans even knew what to do. Anyway, it was a first blood barbed wire steel cage match. Anyway, Ric Flair actually beat Hogan to win it. Surprisingly, Hogan actually lost for once. Anyway, and he also became WCW president for life. And if Flair would have lost, he would have had to retire again to Hogan again. It's just so stupid. It was a convoluted everything. Flair was bleeding, but the referee didn't call it on purpose. It was Charles Robinson. I think that was the start of the Charles Robinson, Little Nate stuff. But yeah, it's so dumb. Like, WCW booking was dumb to begin with, and then the fans are just being dumb too. I just think because they didn't know what... They're probably sitting there like, can this get over so we can go home and get ready to watch Raw tomorrow? But half of the crowd was probably giving free tickets anyway. Sorry. And I hate to put down WCW, because WCW once upon a time was my favorite company. I watched them over WWF any day. WCW Saturday Night was like must-watch TV, you know, before Nitro. And after Nitro, they didn't care about it as much. But, like I said, it pains me to do that, and I'm just sitting here with glee like, oh yeah, WCW sucks. I was a WCW guy first before I was a WWF guy. Well, yeah, once I was old enough to realize there's two different companies here, WCW was my clear pick. And I don't know if that had more to do with the fact that I picked it over WWF, or just the fact that I was able to watch more of Well, I guess if I watched Saturday Night, I could have watched WWF stuff too. I don't know. Anyway, it pains me to talk crap about the company, but it was clearly crap. ECW Living Dangerously was March 21st, the second Living Dangerously. This is from Asbury Park, New Jersey. I actually saw this one too. It was a pretty good event. It had a classic RVD versus Jerry Lynn, one of those ECW TV title matches. Those two had like a long-standing rivalry. It seems like they were fighting every pay-per-view and a couple times a month just on TV. Unless that was just them showing from the pay-per-view. If you didn't watch the pay-per-view, you probably thought it was something new, because they did that a lot. They'll have their big events and they'll break it up over weeks of TV. Or when they did pay-per-views, they'll show a couple of them matches, you know, throughout the month. But anyway, Jerry Lynn versus RVD is the feud that went on forever, but nobody ever got tired of it. Like, literally. I don't think I remember one person saying, oh, these two again. It was like, give me more of these two again. But the main event was World TV Champion... Oh, no, that was not World TV Champion. World Heavyweight Champion Taz. He defeated FTW, which I think they brought that back in AEW, which I don't watch, sorry. But, that was that belt that, F the World belt that Taz made up whenever Shane Douglas was dodging him, wasn't giving him a world title shot. Taz made that title up, and it's not an official world title or even officially recognized title, but they were still recognizing it. Anyway, Sabu had defeated Taz for that, and Taz became world champion finally. But anyway, Taz defeated Sabu for the FTW title to, I guess, not technically unify them, but they basically Taz retired the FTW title after this. Anyway, he made Sabu pass out in the Taz mission. He actually didn't tap out. He, I think one time Fonzie, his manager Bill Alfonso, who we always called Teeth as a kid because it was his like every time you scream and you see his rotten teeth, and we were like, it's teeth, it's teeth. Anyway, he tried to throw in a towel at one point, to give up for Sabu, but Sabu threw it back out, and then he just, like I said, he just passed out, because you weren't going to see Sabu tap out. And I know the tap out thing's been recent because of the John Cena tapped out in his final match. And my thoughts on that are, I have no problem with it. Obviously, it's the way Cena wanted to go out, or he wouldn't have done it. It obviously wasn't something that was so horrible the WWE didn't want him to do it. And look what it's done for Gunther's career. He's going to be even a bigger star than he was, and he was already a pretty big star anyway. But anyway, that's not trying to talk too much about today's stuff. It just reminded me of that. Then we've got a show I didn't actually get to see until a couple years later when I bought it on DVD for Media Play in Norwood. That doesn't exist anymore. It's in Old Surrey Square. But WWF WrestleMania 15 from Philadelphia on March 28th. Pretty big show here. Hardcore Holly defeated WWF Hardcore Champion Billy Gunn and Al Snow in a triple threat match to win the title. And Billy had just won the title from Hardcore Holly back on March 15th, so he was taking it back. Then WWF Tag Team Champions Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett with Deborah retained their titles, defeating D'Lo Brown and Test with Ivory. This match was actually made, nobody knew who the challengers were going to be on this night, because before on back then, they had Sunday Night Heat, obviously, and it was actually a big deal then, before it became just like a show that just has highlights of Raw and a couple matches that no one really cared about too much. They were putting a lot of emphasis on Sunday Night Heat, and of course, being before the pay-per-view, it was always live. I bit my tongue as I was talking about live. It was always live before the pay-per-view, so it would interview wrestlers and just get everybody hyped up to buy the pay-per-view. Well, on this, on the pay-per-view, they actually had a Battle Royal, and the last two people in the Battle Royal would get the team up against the Tag Team Champions. I know, kind of a weird way to make challengers for Tag Team titles on the biggest show of the year. But anyway, it was D'Lo Brown and Test, and they didn't get along and ended up fighting, and that's how they lost the match. The champs retained their titles. So strange knowing 2 months after this, as I talked about last week, was the night Owen Hart died, just two months later. Right then he was Tag Team Champion, and then he went to be in the Blue Blazer stuff, and it's just a shame. It really is. Other matches, Butterbean defeated Bart Gunn in a Brawl for All match. That the Brawl for All was like the thing where this is real and wrestling is not. Apparently, that's stupid Vince Russo crap that he came up with. But that was basically what they're saying to the fans. All this other stuff, it's fake. This is real. I mean, you don't do that on a wrestling show. But Vince Russo, I don't even know how Vince McMahon approved this idea. But anyway, it was, legitimate boxing, and, Bart Gunn had won the tournament, so everybody thought he was this tough guy. And I'm sure he was. I'm not saying he wasn't. But he beat a bunch of wrestlers. They brought Butterbean, and, an actual fighter in, boxing and those tough man fights they used to have. I don't know if they still do. But, yeah, he didn't take long at all for him to just completely knock Bart Gunn out, and pretty much ruin Bart Gunn's career too. It's a shame that stupidity happened. And the thing behind it is the Brawl for All was created by Vince Russo because he didn't like JBL Bradshaw then. And he was always talking about how tough guy he was, so he made a tournament just to prove that Bradshaw wasn't so tough. And Bradshaw didn't win. I think Bart Gunn beat him. But that was this whole basis of making this whole thing and ruining a bunch of careers and probably causing brain damage to wrestlers that weren't trained to be boxers. All because, oh, this guy acts like a tough guy, and I'm another tough guy from New York, but I'm not going to fight JBL, so I'm going to make a tournament where he gets beat up. Anyway, you can tell I cannot stand Vince Russo. Have fun with your stupid clowns and your idiot rapping clowns. That's all I got for that idiot. He don't deserve time on this podcast. Anyway, next we got a Mankind defeated Big Show match to determine the special referee for the main event. Big Show had like 2 chairs in the ring and chokeslammed Mankind through him, and the referee disqualified him. And which made Mankind the special referee for the main event, but Mankind had to get taken out on a stretcher. So more about that when we get to the main event. Then we had a 4-way, 4 corners elimination match for the Intercontinental title. Road Dogg was the champion. He ended up retaining the title. He defeated Goldust with Ryan Shamrock, Ken Shamrock's sister, and Blue Meanie. I wouldn't say Blue Meanie was in the match. He was out there. Those were weird. They would call him Goldust Mommy and all this weird crap. But anyway, he defeated Goldust, Val Venus, and Ken Shamrock to retain the title. And he had actually just won the title March 15th against Ken Shamrock. Or not against Ken Shamrock, against Val Venus. And then he would end up losing the title to Goldust the night after WrestleMania. So he retained that night against 4 people, but then he lost to Goldust the next night. They did that a lot with titles then. Thinking of some convoluted stuff. Kane with China. This was after China betrayed DX and joined the corporation. Kane defeated Triple H by DQ after China betrayed Kane by hitting him with a chair. So, China's back with DX now. Okay, keep that in mind. China betrayed DX, joined the corporation, joining up with Kane, but then betrays Kane, goes back to DX, okay? Next, we got the WWF Women's Champion Sable retaining her title, defeating Tori, which, if you don't know the Sable and Tori story, not trying to rhyme there, it's basically, if you know that later on, they did a much better version of it with Trish Stratus and Mickie James. The obsessed fan thing. Although in this case, Sable was, Tori was the obsessed fan, but in this case, she was actually the good guy. In the Mickie James case, she was like so obsessed she was the heel. But anyway, like I said, a much better version of that than the Sable Tori stuff. Neither one of them could really wrestle. Now, if you remember before, China betrayed DX, joined the corporation. Then, betrayed the corporation, joined DX. We got the WWF European Champion Shane McMahon with Test taking on X-Pac from DX, and Shane McMahon retained his title. And how he did this is Triple H came out and attacked X-Pac, okay? And then China joined him. So, all of a sudden, now, they're betraying DX and joining the corporation. But Kane's already in the corporation, but got betrayed earlier. But now he's out of the corporation, and don't ask me how they didn't have crap rolling downhill like they were so hot though from the Austin and Rock stuff that even stuff that just should make no sense, fans are just accepting it. Whereas with WCW, they're just done with it. But anyway, then we had the infamous Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker, where he beat the Big Boss Man. This is the Ministry of Darkness days, and he hung the Big Boss Man from the cell, and people were like talk crap about like, oh my god, blah 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 blah, about all this stuff. I don't know why that match gets so much hate. It's a good match to me. But anyway, then we finally get to the main event. Before the main event, JR actually comes out to do commentary. He'd been out with the Bell's palsy, which speaking of Vince Russo, that idiot, he had on the team riding with him, Ed Ferrara, later on became Oklahoma, a JR ripoff, and not it wasn't bad enough he was doing the voice and barbecue sauce and slobber knocker and all that, but he was making his face up to where it was like, because Bell's palsy, I can't even talk, Bell's palsy like affects your face and like part of your face don't move. He was doing like the whole, I'm not going to do it on here, obviously, so I'm not making fun of JR, but he did that whole thing, and later on, Jim Cornette slapped him in the face when he finally seen him. That's what that idiot deserves. Him and Vince Russo are biggest piles of crap. Anyway, I'm on Vince Russo again, apparently. Anyway, the main event, of course, The Rock, WWF champion, defending against Stone Cold Steve Austin, who won the Royal Rumble. Well, actually, technically, Vince McMahon won the Royal Rumble, but then he put his spot on the line against Stone Cold in a cage match, thinking it was a sure thing, because I think Stone Cold was either going to be fired. I think he was going to be fired, or I think so, if he lost, or he'd give up. He wouldn't be. I think is that, or he wouldn't be able to wrestle at WrestleMania. Anyway, Vince's plan was to have Big Show debut and come through the ring. He came out through the ring, but then he threw Stone Cold into the cage. But Big Show being so powerful, the cage, like, it was that old, not the blue bar cage, but the black bar cage. The door swung open and Austin dropped to the floor. Big Show foiled the plans again. Just like when I talked about Mankind and the Big Show thing, about Mankind getting the win by DQ. Big Show chokeslammed me through the chairs, but then Mankind had to go to the hospital. Well, Vince was mad at him about that, because, yeah, you beat up Mankind, but you're stupid because you got yourself disqualified. Now Mankind, if he can even come back, it's got to be the referee. So he slapped Big Show in the face, and then Big Show knocked him out. So, anyway, the start of many, many, many Big Show face turns, and then not too long, going to be another heel turn. It wasn't even 2 months, it wasn't even 1 month before he's already turning. Anyway, back to this main event. Vince decides to come out. I'm going to be special referee because Mankind's in the hospital. Well, Shawn Michaels was the commissioner at the time, and he said he's the only one allowed to appoint a referee, so he appoints a regular official. I can't remember which one it was, but just a regular referee. So Vince is pissed. Anyway, 2 referees get taken out. Mankind comes back from the hospital to take over his role and count the deciding pin. Stone Cold Steve Austin defeats WWF champion The Rock to win the title, I believe for the 3rd time. Yeah, because Stone Cold was champion and then he lost for like a week, or maybe not a week, no, it was 1 day. He lost it at a pay-per-view to Kane and then won back the next night. So I believe this is his 3rd time with the title. But it's a great WrestleMania, except for the weird stuff on there that makes no sense. But some other title changes that happened this month. We're almost done with wrestling now. Sorry for those that don't like wrestling. You had to sit through a whole bunch of it. On March 15th, Rey Mysterio Jr. defeated WCW World Cruiserweight Champion Billy Kidman to win the title on Nitro. And of course, like I said, at Uncensored, they became tag team champions. WCW US Champion Scott Hall was stripped of the title by Ric Flair, the president, on Thunder on March 18th, and that was Scott Hall had a bunch of injuries, so they took the title off of him. Scott Steiner would end up defeating Booker T in a tournament to win the title the next month. But yeah, a lot of stuff going on in wrestling. Talk a little bit about kids' meal toys. I always like to talk about those on here. McDonald's had Winnie the Pooh toys, of course, the Happy Meals. These were Winnie the Pooh Sing a Song with Pooh Bear. Now, what you got with these, and I remember actually seeing these, was a set of, there was 8 of them. There was these clip-on, like, plush characters, like you get like their head, like the Winnie the Pooh head or Piglet or whatever character you had, and like this little clip, clip-on book bags and stuff. Of course, it's for kids. By the way, where I live, we always call them book bags. I know people call them backpacks and stuff, but I always call them book bags. The books go in the bag, okay? Anyway, this was like coinciding with Disney's release of like Pooh Bear's, like Disney's sing-along, sing-a-song, whatever you want to call it. But, they release these characters to, get you to go out and buy the video so you can annoy your parents by singing the Winnie the Pooh songs. Wendy's had Tiny Toon Adventures toys. There was 4 of these toys, including a Dizzy Devil, which is like the younger, not the younger version, but I guess, because with Tiny Toons, they wasn't like Bugs Bunny as a kid or a teenager, but it was like younger versions of familiar characters, basically. Instead of Bugs Bunny, you had Buster Bunny and Babs Bunny. But anyway, the Dizzy Devil was like Taz. It was a spinning top, because of course Taz. Connect the Bunnies, which is a set of Buster and Babs bunnies that connected together. There's an X-ray machine that you look inside some of the characters. I don't know what it did, but maybe it showed like their bones, or maybe it had funny things. I don't know. And then like a 3D photo frame featuring several of the characters. Taco Bell had Woody Woodpecker toys because they just come out with like the new Woody Woodpecker show. But they had toys based on that. And then Hardee's, not my Hardee's, because 1997, the real Hardee's went away. Stupid Carl's Jr. bought them. Hate them. Anyway, this has just become me ranting about things. But anyway, they had a set of Pink Panther wind-up toys. As for books, I'd like to talk about books because, of course, Stephen King, my favorite author. Whenever he releases a book in a month and a year of the 90s, I talk about it. But he didn't here, but Goosebumps is probably one of my favorite series of all time. Of course, love the TV show, but by then the regular Goosebump books had ended. They were still a couple series going, though. They had the Goosebumps Choose Your Own Adventure books, which I'm reading one now. I just started. But they were on number 34 at this time. It was Elevator to Nowhere. It's about an elevator, and it can travel to different dimensions. And, of course, the Choose Your Own Adventure type books, you read and you get choices. And depending on your choice, you either live or succeed or you die, but they don't say you die. You just fail. And they make it seem like you die, but they don't specifically say you're dead. And they were on the Goosebumps 2000 series, which I talked about last week. Everything from the mid-90s to the end of the decade, into the millennium, basically, was always something 2000 to make it seem futuristic. Well, Goosebumps was no different. They were on the Goosebumps 2000 series. Episode number 15, Scream School. It's about a kid whose father's like a horror movie director, and the kid's on set, and the lines start blurring between what's like part of the movie and what's real life. I haven't read that one before, but I definitely want to check that out. Alright, now I want to talk a little bit about sports. Being March, there isn't too many of the sports that I like going on. Baseball is just getting ready to start. Football's been over for a couple months. But one thing that I wasn't watching a whole lot of this then, but one thing I like to watch now is March Madness. The only time I ever watch any basketball is March Madness, college basketball's tournament. Only if my teams are in it. My teams are, first and foremost, Ohio State, because, love Ohio State. We're going to win the freaking, the NCAA championship football-wise 2 years in a row. Guarantee it right now on camera. If I'm wrong, show me this later, but we're going to win it. But also UC, University of Cincinnati Bearcats, and the Xavier Musketeers. And Xavier is a college. It's in Cincinnati, and it was probably closest to where I lived as a kid in Norwood. Outside of Norwood. But those are my teams, so as long as one of those teams is still in the tournament, I'll keep watching. If not, I'm done. I don't even care about the championship if not. That's how little I care about basketball. But anyway, this year in 1999, the March Madness, basically going off the 98-99 season, how basketball is. UC beat George Mason in the first round, but then they lost in the round of 32 to Temple. UK, which is my wife's favorite team, University of Kentucky Wildcats, they defeated Mexico State in the first round, Kansas in overtime in the round of 32, Miami of Ohio in the Sweet 16, but then lost to Michigan State in the Elite 8. And then Ohio State beat Murray State in the first round, wherever that is, Detroit Mercy in the round of 32, Auburn in the Sweet 16, St. John's in the Elite 8, and then they lost to the eventual NCAA champions, Connecticut, who defeated Duke in the championship, by the way. But they lost to them in the Final Four. But going back and looking, it says all appearances for Ohio State in the tournament were, all wins, all anything, were vacated because of violations of some NCAA thing by the head coach. I don't know what all went on with that, but there seems to be a lot of that in college sports. Not as bad as freaking Michigan. If they aren't cheating, then they're doing stuff to women. I'll just leave it at that, but you probably seen in the news a freaking piece of crap Michigan coach. And that's just because I'm an Ohio State fan talking crap about Michigan. If it was an Ohio State coach, I would be calling him out too and done with them and hope they never came back. But anyway, another sport that I used to follow a whole lot was NASCAR. I wasn't following it at this time. It wasn't until I got reconnected with my dad, as I talked about last week. In May, my Uncle Dan died which is a horrible thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it was the thing that got me and my dad reconnected again. But I found out how much of a huge Jeff Gordon fan he was, and I started watching. Of course, became a Jeff Gordon fan too. I got a Jeff Gordon coffee cup today for my daughter because today's technically my birthday. And when I'm recording this, who knows when I watch it, it could be May, and you wonder why you're wearing a stupid Christmas hat. But anyway, by the way, it's not a stupid hat. My wife made it for me. But I'm just saying, you'd be like, it's not Christmas. My voice like, Christmas? I can't even talk. Christmas. There, I can talk. But anyway, in NASCAR at this time, Jeff Burton won the Las Vegas 400 at, of course, Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And then 2 weeks later, won the Trans-South Financial 400 at Darlington. You gotta love those corporate names. Jeff Gordon, obviously my favorite, won the Golden Corral 500. Love Golden Corral. Whew, I love that place too much. He won the Golden Corral 500 at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And then Terry Labonte, of course, with the Kellogg Cornflakes car, I remember, won the Prime Star 500 at Texas Motor Speedway. And of course, this was, as I said last week, this is the year Dale Jarrett won his first and only NASCAR championship. Of course, in November is when they figure out who the champion is based on whatever. It used to be just points. Now they got some playoff system, and it seems like every year they change stuff, and they got stages in this, and just, I can't keep up with it. I tried to watch it. It's not interesting to me anymore because it seems to be more about just all this other stuff and less about just people going out there and just driving. It seems like they just put too much emphasis on all this other stuff. But I wanted to talk this month about just some of my favorite serials from the 80s and 90s. And of course, I'm not going to talk too much about like the movie tie-in series like Batman, the Turtles and stuff. I'm just talking more just in general about just some cereals that I remember eating and stuff. I think if I had to think about, because I had to think about it, obviously, I made up this list, but I think my favorite cereal of all time, like, just if I could name one right now, it's probably Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I love that stuff. Although they got some stuff out now I think it's called like Mexican hot cocoa or Mexican hot chocolate or Mexican chocolate, something like that. Toast Crunch. Where it's just, oh god, that cereal, I can't get enough of it. I'm going to be sad when it's gone away because I think it's a seasonal thing. I didn't get it last year, but I got it this year. I'm on like second box of it. I need to buy some more before they're gone. But anyway, I think my favorite cereal of all time is probably Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Great flavor in that. But some other cereals that I remember, and I'll talk a little bit about, Alpha Bits, if you remember those, they're discontinued now. The ones I like more were, of course, Marshmallow Alpha Bits. And it's basically just your basic, like, Lucky Charms type cereal. Of course, Lucky Charms, I think it's oat pieces or whatever it is. Like, basically like Cheerios with marshmallows in is basically what it is, A basic cereal, of course, the kids love mostly the marshmallows. If we're getting full, we're going to eat the rest of the marshmallows and leave the plain pieces, the no flavor pieces. Speaking of Cheerios, though, Apple Cinnamon Cheerios, man, those were good. They were packed with flavor, I remember. And of course, Apple Jacks, the famous commercial. They don't even taste like apples. Now, as an adult, I realize it does taste a little bit like apples, or maybe it's just me thinking it. But you sometimes you remember the commercials and mascots as much as you remember the cereals. I remember Apple Jacks was always like, why do they call it Apple Jacks if it doesn't taste like apples? But, of course, there were the monster cereals that they discontinued for a while, but then they've brought back in recent years around Halloween. The Count Chocula, the Boo Berries, the Frankenberries, and they've got a bunch more now. They got like a caramel apple one. The taste of them wasn't the best, like even like the chocolate ones, the Boo Berry. It was almost like a slight flavor to me, not like a really strong chocolatey flavor for the Count Chocula. The marshmallows were the best part to me. And of course, we Captain Crunch. Love freaking Captain Crunch, and especially Captain Crunch with Crunch Berries, one of the best of all time. Peanut Butter Crunch is good too. Of course, they have Christmas Crunch around Christmas time, and definitely love the Oops All Berries because it's just the berry part. But for those, I like those with the plain Captain Crunch cereal. They're good. I know they got sugar on them, unlike Cheerios, but still, they're the basic plain pieces, but I love just regular Captain Crunch as it is. But you add the berries, and it's just almost perfect. And then, of course, Honey Nut Cheerios weren't, weren't as good as apple cinnamon Cheerios to me, but they still had a lot of good flavor to them. And then regular Cheerios, if I'm eating those or something like, or Corn Flakes, then I've got to have so much sugar in there that I scrape the bottom of this. You ever do that? You scrape the bottom of the spoon and you get like that bound of sugar in there. It's obviously not good for you. Somehow I don't have diabetes. Don't ask me. But if I was having regular Cheerios, I'm having regular couple cups of sugar almost. Cocoa Pebbles. Oh, I love those. Those and Fruity Pebbles. Those are so good. Cocoa Puffs. Those are so good too. A lot of chocolatey flavor in that, especially, and the Cocoa Pebbles. Cookie Crisp. Now that's one that I always remember the commercials of the people getting arrested for stealing them, the cartoon characters. But that was one cereal I never liked, even as a kid, because it's like, it's promising you basically little tiny cookies in a box, but you're not really getting little tiny cookies. You're just getting this cereal, like multi-grain cereal, with barely any chocolate flavor. It didn't taste like a cookie at all. I wish it had just made little cookies, but I know that's not healthy. But yeah, I never really did like Cookie Crisp, even as a kid. It never fooled me into thinking it's real. Of course, like I talked about Corn Flakes. Frosted Flakes were definitely so much better. And then, of course, there's Fruit Loops. Frosted Flakes, first of all, they're great. Tony the Tiger. Fruit Loops with Toucan Sam. Those are, I don't know what fruit was in the Fruit Loops, but it didn't have any flavor, like, as far as, like, fruit flavor. And it all tasted the same, but whatever the flavor was, it was good. And Fruit Loops with marshmallows, and also Frosted Flakes with marshmallows came out, and I was like, wow, where was this all my life? So they didn't have those when I was a kid. Frosted Mini Wheats, the shredded Mini Wheats. My favorites of those were always the blueberry and the strawberry, but sometimes just the plain ones with the frosting were good. I'd always take the pieces and eat the frosting off the side and then eat the rest of it. Especially if you ever remember those giant ones that come in a thing, you gotta break them up just to fit into a bowl. Golden Grams, I love that. There's a cereal I know it's not 90's, I don't think, but I got now. It's so it's like, it's a generic brand, but it's like Cocoa Pebbles and marshmallows mixed together. And there's even one with s'mores where you have regular marshmallows, little chocolate cereal pieces, and little like graham cracker pieces. Or it wasn't little chocolate pieces. It was either Cocoa Pebble type pieces or Cocoa Puff type pieces. But anyway, the s'more cereal is really good. Honey Bunches of Oats. I love those, especially with the strawberries. You get those like freeze-dried strawberries in there. Man, those were good. Regular Honey Bunches of Oats were good too. Remember the first time I'd seen them and tried, I was like, this is going to be like Cheerios or something. No, it was really good. Honeycomb cereal. Can't forget that, and a crazy honeycomb character of like the late 90's. That's really good. Sugar Smacks, or as they later became Honey Smacks. Those were so full of flavor. I love those. I didn't really care much for Life cereal or Kix cereal, but I did like the Berry Kix with I remember the distinct berry flavor of those Berry Kix. I love those. I'd already talked about Lucky Charms, of course. Oreo O's, which is a late 90's thing, and they brought it back now. Really good. You get the chocolate. You don't really taste like you're eating Oreos, but unlike Cookie Crisp, there was still a good chocolate flavor, and like a cream flavor that's supposed to be like the cream filling of the Oreo, but it's in the cereal. Like I said, unlike Cookie Crisp, it actually tasted good. And then of course you got Raisin Bran, where the famous 2 scoops of raisins in it, and you get most of the bran flakes eaten, and you'd be left with all the raisins near the bottom. It was just good. Reese's Puffs, which is a Reese's cereal, which is mostly just peanut butter. I wish there would have been some chocolatey in that, but it was still really good. Of course, classic Rice Krispies. Everybody knows that. And they also had the Marshmallow Rice Krispies, which, of course, one of the biggest things to come out of Rice Krispies was making the Rice Krispie treats, which I remember my mom making as a kid. And it used to be just a recipe that people would make at home. But then, of course, they started making them and selling actual Rice Krispie treats at stores, the homemade stuff. But they also had Fruity Rice Krispies, which is sort of like supposed to be like a Fruity Pebbles type thing. But Fruity Pebbles always tasted a lot better to me. And then, of course, the cereal that's only for kids, Silly Rabbit, Trix. A lot of fruit flavor in those. I thought a better fruit flavor than Fruit Loops, but still, they had different shapes and colors, and it's like, why bother? It's all the same flavor, but of course, for kids, you gotta have all the different colors. Waffle Crisp, which is like little waffles, really good syrupy flavor on those. And of course, one I didn't eat a lot because it was just boring, and it was always like a name brand we never had. Is iconic for cereal is Wheaties, and it's more iconic for its boxes. Obviously, Michael Jordan's been on the Wheaties box. They always put like the super athletes on there. I said never was a fan of the cereal, but everybody knew the Wheaties boxes. You're always looking, I don't remember how often they changed. I don't think it was every month, but it might have been. But everybody's looking at, that was like the big thing, Back then it was like, who's on the cover of TV Guide and who's on the cover of Wheaties? But the last one I want to talk about is that only poor people seem to know about this, King Vitamin. If I had to describe it, it's sort of in the vein of a Captain Crunch, but not exactly. But I remember of course I've talked about this before, but the great thing about cereal boxes is, before I get into the King Vitamin, is one, you can get prizes inside, but also the stuff on the box, like they get puzzles and board games and different things to cut out and mazes and just word searches and just fun stuff to read. Now, cereal boxes were an experience in the 90s, I'm telling you. But back to King Vitamin. It was something we got with WIC, which is what poor people get. Nowadays, you get it all on a card. Back in the day, they used to give out these vouchers that you could take in the stores. But even before that, I remember getting a delivery. I don't know if it was once a week, once a month, whenever it was. But it would come in a milk crate. And you would get like milk, the government cheese. I don't know if it's that government cheese or like the big block that everybody thinks of. But there was like dairy stuff and cereal. It was basically, if you're a certain income, you can get that. And back then, WIC they delivered it to your door. Well, the cereal they had was King Vitamin. And I don't care if it was poor people food or not, it was some of the best cereal I've ever had. And I wish I could still find it because I would eat me some King Vitamin right now. But yeah. King Vitamin, the cereal only the poor people know. But, yeah, as I alluded to before, I was, like, going through changes in my head or something. I've told this story before, but I don't know if I've gone in depth, but I'm trying to figure out why. I was skipping school a lot, okay? I tried to wrap my mind, and I still can't get my mind around exactly why I did it. One of the reasons is because, we'd moved out of my stepdad's house, as I'd said. So we moved to my granny's house, and it's not that I didn't want to be there. As you'll listen to, if you listen to the bonus episode or watch it, whatever, Over the River and Through the Woods, of how, great it was to be there. But at this time, everything, you would think I'd be like the happiest ever. I'm living at granny's house, the place I love the most. I'm away from the person in this world that I wanted to be away from the most. But I wasn't happy. I was, fighting with my brothers all the time. I was in moods all the time. And then going to school, I was like confused to where all the classes were. So I just started, hanging out in the bathroom. That's how it started. Because it started from I couldn't find the class I was going to. I was showing up late and getting laughed at, and I didn't like that, obviously. And unlike where in my old school, people knew me, and if they laughed at me, for some reason you'd think if they're strangers it wouldn't matter. But to me, people laughing at me, like, you see me doing a stupid Crackhead Dave and all these other videos. I don't care if people laugh at me, even if they're laughing at me. But it was something about, these, I don't know these people and they're laughing at me, and it's just, I'm never going to make friends here. I don't like this place. I'm going to go hang out in the bathroom. And then it turned into the woods, and I'll tell you how I even discovered the woods. At my granny's house, I talk about in the story in the bonus episode about this place called the Bottoms. It was like you go out the door and you go this way and go to this way. I do a lot of this way, but they were called the Bottoms. I don't know why. It was just what they were called. It's just a field basically. But in the back of it, there was woods, and we'd only gone a little bit through the woods before. I guess we were all just too afraid to go too far, because the woods seemed so big. But one day while we were, when we first moved to Granny's, I think it was during the summer, the year before we'd even started up school there. We were just back there exploring. I remember that it was so muddy that we had mud like up to almost to our knees. It was so muddy back there. Like at one point we thought we were in quicksand, but we weren't. But anyway, we just went exploring through those woods because we were, bored, I guess. And I say we, is my brother Josh, and I think Travis might have been with us too. I think Clone was too young to go. But, we ended up coming out of the end of the woods, whichever way we went. We must have went straight through them. But we came out to this field, and we looked across, and there was a school, and I knew I'd be going to school there come summertime, and fall. But it was also where my mom went to school at high school, so we'd known it was there. So whenever I went to school, when I was trying, when school started up, I went on the bus in the morning, and then sometimes I would just decide to walk home at night, not at night, but after school. The first time I did it, I not only walked through, back through the woods, go through that field and into the woods, but I actually walked I don't know, it was like a mile or two down the road to the UDF, one of my favorite stores of all time, UDF, because I had some money to buy me some wrestling magazines, and then walked back, and that was a long walk. But anyway, we discovered that, and one day I just decided to leave school, and I went back there, and I would just sit in the woods all day, and then I would start planning to sit. First it was just like everything going on, I'm not having a bad day, I'm going to go out to the woods. Then I started planning it. I put me a chair out there. I would take my stepdad Steve's baseball cards out there. Not to steal them or anything, just as something to do. I would just read them and then take them back. I'd have my Walkman, where I could listen to tapes and the radio and just hang out there all day. And one thing I've never talked about before, and I don't know if statute of limitations are passed or anything, but there was a point, show you my mindset, okay? There was a point in time where I was literally breaking into cars. Not breaking things, but opening car doors. This was a nice town. People didn't lock their car doors then. And these were teenagers in high school. And I was just looking for CDs, looking for this and that. I never took anything, but I was doing that. And I got caught by a security guard. It's I saw you going through that woman's car. And I was pretending, I don't even remember what I said. I don't know if I said I was looking for my mom's car or something. And I think the security guard knew what was going on because he wasn't stupid. But at the same time, I think he wanted to give me a break because, I don't know. Thank God he did. Otherwise, I would have been arrested for breaking and entering, even though I wasn't taking anything. But that just shows, the way my mind was. These days, there's people, steal from the self-checkout all the time, and, I could easily do it. I could easily scan this, and, but, I don't do it because it's wrong, you know what I mean? And, I'm so dead set against that behavior that I look back at myself then, and some of the skips sitting in the woods and stuff is funny, but I've never told that before because I'm so embarrassed by it. But I don't know why that I decided to tell on here. I guess just I doubt there's any teenagers watching this. It's probably us old people from this time. But if you're going through weird changes like that, talk to somebody. I wish I would have had a counselor or something I would have went to and try to work through this. Maybe I would have had a better relationship with them. I mean, I ended up having a great relationship with my mom, and then, of course, like I said, reconnected with my dad. But, during those days, it got so bad that by the end of the year, she sent me to live with my dad in Indiana. I was so hard to deal with that, I was she wouldn't put it that I was ruining her life, but I would put it that way, that I was ruining her life and, causing all these problems with my brothers and just... Like I said, I encourage anybody is going through that time period of 13 to 18, those years you change as a teenager to, talk to somebody, all this crazy stuff, because it's not just a generational thing. It's, if, you're that age, no matter what time period you're in, you're going to be going through all these changes and you're not going to understand them. Talk to somebody I would say talk to someone older about it, but make sure it's someone you can trust, not just anybody. I'm not putting it out there for teenagers to contact me or anything, unless your parents contacted me to talk to my kid about this, tell them what you did. I'm certainly not trying to get anybody to reach out to me. I'm just more like counselors at school, therapists, maybe if you got an older brother or something, but I know at the same time I say that, if I was told that as a kid, I would have like, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what's going on in my head. There's nothing wrong with me. There was a lot wrong with me. And that's not, I'm not saying everybody was like that. A lot of people had normal teenager, childhood, whatever, and, didn't get into problems. But some do. And, that's, just I don't want people going down that type of road where if I would have continued that, who knows what I'd done. I might have started stealing stuff. It sounds strange now, but who's to say I wouldn't have tried to found maybe somebody's key and like, hey, I'm going to try to drive. I don't know how far it could have went. That security guard scared me to death, and I never tried that again. I always went right back to the woods. But who knows what could have happened out of that. And I'm glad that, like I said, I've admitted before that I'd stolen wrestling magazines from the stores and stuff. And like I said, another thing I'm not proud of. But it could have been a lot worse. And I'm just glad it didn't get that way. But I, especially as I get older and older and older, I understand why kids lash out at things. Especially as a parent, even though you're on the other side, you don't understand. I don't know what's going on with in their head. I told them to talk to me about this and this, and it's you can't. It's weird. As a teenager, you can't understand an adult as far as like well, they're going to help me with this. I can turn this around. And as an adult, you don't, even though you've been through it, you don't quite understand what the teenagers are going through. You're like, how can I help them out? It seems so simple. Just tell me this. But in the teenager's mind, it's one of them generational things that even if you've been through it, you don't understand it, which is really strange to me. It's like, I've been through all this. Why don't I understand all the things my kids are thinking or going through or are doing or trying or, it's like, I was there once, but that comes down to trying to get too philosophical here, but it comes down to everybody being an individual and no two people being alike. But anyway, this is my therapy session for the week. But yeah, I just want to kind of get into that, and if something really made me want to tell, and if I ended up their car was broken into, I didn't steal nothing, but that was when was that? 1999, so that was 26 years ago. And if you want to come and arrest me for it, I guess go ahead. I admitted to a crime on a camera here. But, no, but seriously, stupid thing, and I'm glad it didn't lead farther. I'm glad that security guard caught me, because who knows? Who knows what could have came out of it. I definitely, it took me a while, but I turned things around. I'm lucky I didn't fall into drugs or alcohol or bad decisions and crimes and everything else. I'm not saying I'm perfect. Oh, I do this right now, but I'm just glad that I decided at some point it became a decision. I'm not going to go down this path. I'm not. I never once tried a drug of any kind. Never. I would say I've never once drank. I've drank a couple times, but I haven't in a long time. And whenever I did, I never even got close to anything that would even be considered a buzz or anything like that. And it was all just basically like, oh, I'm drinking this, and my wife, it was a funny story where I was going through a midlife crisis. I basically was, just where I thought, nobody thinks I'm cool, nobody thinks I'm going to start drinking. Yeah, I drank like a half a wine cooler. Well, that's my drinking phase. But anyway, just I don't know if I have a moral or a lesson there other than just if for some reason you're watching this and you're a teenager going through those awkward years, you probably don't even realize they're awkward years. It's just stuff you're going through. Things will definitely get better. I know everybody says, oh, things will get better, but they really will. You just gotta give it time and try to make the best decisions you can. And if you mess up, try not to let that weigh you down, because I could have let that weigh me down for years. I could have been like so guilt-ridden that I just like, well, I guess I'm a criminal now, I'll go do all this. And it was stupid 15-year-old opening car doors and looking around basically for a thrill because I was bored. It could have turned into a lot worse, and some people it does and some people it don't. I guess it just comes down to chemical makeup, and I'm going blah blah blah. I'm sorry, I'm weighing this podcast down. We ain't got too much more to talk about. In TV news, as we transition here, no really transition, just go right to it. A show that was ending It was a cartoon series, really, based on the Disney movie Hercules. It was Hercules, the Disney series. I don't know the exact title, other than just Hercules. But like I said, based on the movie, they were ending. It ran for 2 seasons and had 65 episodes. The first season was in syndication, but then the second was on ABC. You know, it was once the ABC Disney merger happened, and they were on ABC Saturday morning cartoons for the second season. And then a new channel debuted, Nickelodeon Gas, or Games and Sports. Now, it wasn't on our cable then. It was on some digital cable channels. It became more widespread later. But of course, this was that time during digital cable when they were adding channel after channel. Once they, you got those boxes where you could, you get all these channels on them. They were, this was basically Nickelodeon's way of putting its game shows and stuff like that on there, because they weren't showing them a whole lot on Nickelodeon Replay. So they had the, of course, the Double Dare and all those great things. And I can't remember exactly all what was on there. I know by the time I'd seen the channel, it was like 2005 or 2006, near the end of it. And it was mostly just reruns of those game shows, which I was fine with. But during its, first years, I don't know what all they showed on there. But wish I was still around showing that stuff. Luckily, Paramount has Nick Arcade and Legend of Hidden Temple and some of the Double Dare. They need a lot more of it. But speaking of Nickelodeon and all that, I'm going to go through the Saturday morning cartoons and the Nickelodeon lineup for Saturday. It was March 6th of 19... I sound like I'm an idiot. March 6th of 1999. And some of these might sound the same as last week's, because like I said, I did May of last week, so they were in the same season. But anyway, we'll go through them. Over on ABC, we had Disney's Hercules. It was getting ready to end. Disney's Doug, part of Disney's One Saturday Morning, their weird thing they came up with. But Disney's Doug was, as I said last week, is not as good as Nickelodeon Doug. Then Recess, which I never cared for, and Pepper Ann. The Bugs Bunny and Tweety Show. Got to get the Looney Tunes characters on there everywhere, it seems, which I have no problem with. Then we got 101 Dalmatians, the series. I never really watched that. And The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which, again, I never watched that. And CBS, we've got Rupert, Anatole, which I seen last week. I don't know what that is. Anatole. Dumb Bunnies. Flying Rhino Junior High. I've never heard of these. Birds, spelled with a Z. And then Mythic Warriors, Guardians of the Legend. Don't know what that is. Then over on Fox, we got Spider-Man. I remember I watched Spider-Man, the animated series, for a while. Not as good as Batman, the animated series, or X-Men, the animated series, but still a good cartoon. Godzilla, the series, I never really got into that. Never really care about the Godzilla movies either, to be honest. Power Rangers Lost Galaxy, I was not watching it this time. Once they got into space, I stopped watching. But I need to watch some of those episodes because I need to see how... I know how it ends, where like Rita and Zed get turned into normal people. Sorry if I spoiled there. Kind of ends the main arc of the regular Power Rangers. But I think Lost Galaxy, they were on to other characters, and it's gotten crazy over the years. The Magician, I've never heard of that show. Then they showed a rerun of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, The Good Days. Then we got Mad Jack the Pirate, don't know what that is. The Secret Files of the Spy Dogs. I think I've seen that on, like, sometimes I'll watch on YouTube, like, blocks of old cartoons and stuff. I think I remember seeing an episode of that. Then on NBC, I could care less about their teenage shows. Saved by the Bell, The New Class, crap. I only cared about the regular Saved by the Bell. Hang Time, One World, City Guys, Hang Time Again, NBA Inside Stuff. Didn't care about any of that stuff. NBC went down the drain, in my opinion, when they changed their Saturday morning cartoons to Saturday morning teen shows. Saved by the Bell was good. Anything else on there was failure to me, and it really showed in their ratings. Then on the WB, we got the new Batman Superman Adventures, which I'd never seen that, I don't think. Then we got Men in Black the series. It was an okay cartoon, not one of my favorites. They didn't put a lot of thought into the stories of those. Basically just a bunch of people in black suits going around and a bunch of aliens. If they had much from the actual movies, I don't remember it. Batman Beyond, I watched a little bit of that. Like I said, Batman the Animated Series, my all-time favorite. Pokemon wouldn't be caught dead watching, sorry. Travis and Josh and Clint love Pokemon. I care less. The Big Cartoony Show. I don't know what that is. Hysteria. It sounds familiar, but I don't know if I've ever seen it. And the Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries. As I said last week, it's like pick 2 random Looney Tunes characters, or Merry Melodies, whatever you feel like calling it, and give it a subject. Let's see. Randomly pick out. Oh, we got Sylvester and Tweety. You know, they'll go together. Okay. What are they going to be doing? Oh, they're going to solve some mysteries. It's like, that's where they come up with these ideas, I swear. But then we're going to switch to Nickelodeon. And, of course, Nickelodeon lineup starts at midnight, so we'll be on Nick at Night. We got the Brady Bunch, one of my favorites. Happy Days, another one. Love that show. Then we got Mary Tyler Moore Show, Dick Van Dyke Show, Taxi, Newhart. So this is The Simpsons for a minute. No, the Jeffersons. The episode was called Florence's Problem. Florence was their maid, and she gave it back to George as much as he gave it to her. Like, those two were always getting on each other. If it was a modern-day sitcom and George wasn't married, it'd be like, okay, those two are, by third season, those two are going to get together. But no, those two hated each other. Laverne and Shirley, I Love Lucy, one of my mom's favorites. Bewitched, one of my wife's favorites. Mary Tyler Moore Show again. Then at 6 we start Nick Jr. Because of course this was it was a Saturday, but Nick Jr. At this time started at 6. It used to start at 9, but now it starts at 6. We got Gullah Gullah Island, one of my favorite shows that they came out with on Nickelodeon towards the end of the 90s. I really love learning about that culture. Blue's Clues, of course, a classic one. This one's called Magenta Comes Over, when they came out with Blue's, I think it was cousin, Magenta. The Wobulous World of Dr. Seuss. I never really watched that. Then, You're on Nickelodeon, Charlie Brown, one of the many shows that Nickelodeon would get, and they would put on a Nickelodeon name, or basically, I don't know what the word I'm looking for. When they put the logo on the thing, not timestamp. You probably know what I'm talking about. Anyway, they got Charlie Brown like, well, you're on Nickelodeon, Charlie Brown. Then we had Nicktoons TV from 8 until noon, and it doesn't specifically say which one. I think that was that time when they would just randomly show one of the Nicktoons. Of course, Nicktoons could be anything from Doug, Rugrats, Ren and Stimpy, Rocko's Modern Life, Hey Arnold. There's probably some other ones. But yeah, they were just a block of Nicktoons from 8 until noon. Then at noon we got Tiny Toon Adventures, which is one of the greatest cartoons of all time. Then we got Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon, another Nickelodeon name slapped onto a series. Inspector Gadget, and I love that. I know it was a Saturday morning cartoon first, but my first time experiencing Inspector Gadget was on Nickelodeon during the afternoon. Sports Illustrated for Kids show. I remember that, but never watched it. Looks like this one's about Roger. Okay, if you know anything about Roger Clemens later in life, this title is going to sound funny, or this description. Clemens' success both off and on the field is based on a strong family life. Except we won't tell the kids about him cheating on his wife and making videos with other people. Anyway, I just found that funny. I don't think that was known then, but it's like, we shouldn't talk about that. And then we got 3 o'clock, Wild and Crazy Kids. Love that. It was a game show, but more of like an outdoor activity show. Next one's called You're On. I don't remember that one. Then we got The Adventures of Pete and Pete, which I never really liked. Sorry, I know a lot of people love that, and they're like, you love the 90s, you don't like Pete and Pete? No, I don't, sorry. Then we got Clarissa Explains It All. Then at 5 o'clock, we've got, it's not even time for Snick yet. We got Are You Afraid of the Dark? The Tale of the Magician's Assistant. That's a good one, I remember that one. Then we got During the Day, which I'd commented on just being weird last week. Like, they had kids watching this, the Brady Bunch. You know, not that anything wrong with the Brady Bunch, but it's like, they had it on 5:30, like almost peak Nickelodeon watching time. Then we got the Brothers Flub. Don't know what that is. And at 6:30 we got Doug. 7 o'clock, Hey Arnold. Not one of my favorites. Here's another Nicktoon, the Angry Beavers. I never really liked that one. Then on Snick we've got new episode of Rugrats. Keenan and Kel, of course, all-time favorite. And then an hour of All That. And I guess that's why they showed Are You Afraid of the Dark earlier, because normally... and was a half hour. Then Are You Afraid of the Dark to end the night? But this was an hour of it because it was their 100th episode, and it was actually the first time they'd ever done a live episode. So that was, that's the way they end the day on SNCC, and then go right, I guess, to transition, in case there's some kids still watching, they put the Brady Bunch on again. Then the Wonder Years, Happy Days, and then they end the day with Laverne and Shirley. And then, of course, there's a note down here about the Adventures of Pete and Pete. That was actually their last episode, and before just all reruns. But so if you like Pete and Pete, that was the last episode. I didn't, so I don't care. Sorry. But before we get out of here, I do want to talk about the TGIF lineup, which is pretty much the same as I talked about last week's for May. We had Sabrina the Teenage Witch in the 3rd season. Boy Meets World was in their 6th season, second to last season. Last week we talked about the finale, because of course it was May, that's when the finales come, about Topanga breaking off the engagement with Corey because her parents told her that they're getting divorced, and that just completely messed with their head. Like, well, if they can't make it, how are we going to make it? But during this time, 2 months prior, they're planning the wedding, and Topanga's getting crazy, trying to micromanage everything and wanting all this expensive stuff she can't afford. It's just a whole thing. And then 2 guys, a girl, and a pizza place. They're in the second of 4 seasons. And then the show, which I've never heard of before till last week. Well, maybe I heard of it before because I'd done a couple episodes from 1999. But anyway, I've never seen it ever, called Brothers Keeper. They were in their first and only season. But it's been a pretty fun podcast. Hope I haven't kept you on here too long. Next week, we're not going to be in 99 again. Like I said, I picked these at random. Next week, we're going to episode 59. And for some reason, I've just, from things that have happened and, personal life and pop culture and everything, I've decided that my favorite year is probably of the 90s, and probably of all time, is probably 1996. It just seems, music-wise, TV-wise, personal, just everything. My favorite year as a kid was 1996. Well, we're going to the beginning of that year. We're going to go to January of 1996. This is just my 3rd trip through 1996. At this time, I was 12 years old and in 6th grade. But hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Check out the bonus episode, Over the River and Through the Woods. I have a lot of fun reading that on there. And it's not just me reading off the paper. I give some thoughts and everything. But I hope you guys, like I said, I'm recording this on my birthday, December 23rd. Hope you guys have a Merry Christmas. And just, enjoy time with your family or whoever you're spending Christmas with, because you never know when you're going to have, it's going to be the last time. I'll try to end on a depressive note, but you never know when it's going to be the last time you get to see people. And, the holidays tends to be a time you see people, that you don't normally see on a regular basis. So, enjoy your time with them. Not trying to depress people, like I said, but you never know what's going to be the last time. So hopefully it ain't the last time I'll see you guys. Well, if not, then I'll see you next time.
And now, I predict the future. Next week, you'll be in the same time, same place, same station, for another hideous, hateful haul of horror.
Tales from the 90's never die. In our hearts they testify. VCRs and mixtape spins, where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and